Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Squared Circle News Network. I am your host, Darren Patrick, and this is episode number 16 for July 10th, 2021. I want to thank everybody for taking the time to click on this link and joining me. I appreciate it more than I can ever tell you. As long as you're here, click the subscribe button. Why not add another podcast to your watching list? It can't hurt anything, and you might find something you enjoy here. And as long as you're watching, also click that little thumbs up and hit the little bell notification so that every time that I upload new content, you will be made aware. I have a feeling this episode might run a little bit longer than my previous episodes. I've been hovering around that 30-minute mark. It's about average for me. But a lot of things I want to talk about today, so this might go a little bit longer. So I hope you have the patience to stay with me. There's some good things that I'm going to talk about and a lot of things I want to point out. And as always, I'm going to start with the WWE. You got to start, even though the WWE, as not only my opinion, but as one of the points I'm going to make here today, will point out is probably the lowest quality of programming. It still is the biggest dog in the wrestling world, so you kind of have to start with them, and why not? So going to my point about quality of programming, the first thing I want to talk about in the world of WWE is this past Monday night's Raw. As you're probably already aware, drew the absolute lowest rating in the entire history of Monday Night Raw, and we're talking a lot of years. A lot of years. They drew a average 1.47. I never thought that I would see that in WWE, WWF to begin with, WWE programming. Never thought I'd see a rating that low. I mean, and this really hurts because, as I've talked about in my starting episodes and going forward, I've been a fan of this product for so many years, and it's given me so many memories, so much enjoyment, good times with family, friends, things like that. As silly as it sounds, it's just professional wrestling, but you know what? It's something that used to bring people together and give you that bonding experience and just so many good memories. And now this kind of proves my point, and this is what I've been talking about. Like, I've been talking about the sad quality of WWE programming for the last, I want to say, at least 2 decades, because it's been on a downward slope for a very considerable amount of time. And this rating shows that fans are just fed up with it. They're not getting the good programming. They're not getting the quality programming. They want better. They deserve better. You're taking the fans' money. They're buying tickets. They're ordering pay-per-views. The WWE network doesn't matter so much anymore because it's owned by Peacock now. But the whole amount of time that the WWE owned and managed the network, people were paying these network fees to watch the programming. They buy the merchandise, the t-shirts, the belts, you name it. And you can't return that respect and that passion by giving them the program that they're hungry for. It's just not fair, and this is what happens. And this proves my point, because if the programming was good, the ratings wouldn't be where they are right now. 1.47. We're talking about a show that in its peak period was outdrawing Monday Night Football and every other show, not only on cable but on TV. It was a juggernaut for a long time. And it's fallen to its lowest point ever, all because Vince McMahon is too arrogant to admit that he's wrong, and he can't run this show anymore. He can't be the captain of this ship anymore because he's not capable. He cannot put out the programming that he used to, and it's just not fair. It's not right. And this is why fans are turning their back, because they're not going to support something that is not paying them back for their dedication to the product. And that's where I've been saying it's going to go. And if nothing changes, it's going to continue to drop. Now, Stephanie McMahon is reportedly having scheduled meetings with the networks, USA and Fox, to try and pitch ideas to to drum up ratings, to bring the ratings numbers up. And the thing that scares me about that is the last time that a network got involved in pitching ideas, the USA Network pretty much demanded that the WWE introduce this 24/7 title. And if there's fans of what's happened with the 24/7 title, I'd be greatly surprised. I'm sure kids love it. Kids love the antics and the garbage that goes on with the 24/7 title because it's just downright silly. It absolutely is. You know, you've got R-Truth with his crazy gimmick going after his title, and I'd be lying if I didn't say R-Truth didn't have his share of humorous moments. But all in all, I mean, come on, look at the people that have held this title. You know, Gerald Briscoe, Pat Patterson, non-wrestlers. I mean, it's absolutely ridiculous. It's a joke. It's not a legitimate title, and this is what you got the last time a network input an idea into getting ratings up, and this is what you got. And I don't know that anybody within the USA Network or within Fox knows what good professional wrestling programming and booking is, but I'm sure we're going to find out, because if Stephanie McMahon legitimately has these meetings scheduled, and right now with these numbers, they're going to be at the mercy of the networks. You can't look at the network who is sponsoring your shows, putting your show on the air, paying to have your show on the air, and getting these absolutely terrible ratings. They're not getting a return on their investment. You can't look at them and say, no, we're not going to take your ideas. They'll easily find a way to null and void your contract, and you're not going to have a home outside of, you know, ESPN 8 maybe at 3 o'clock in the morning. Who knows? But this is going to be an interesting one to watch, to see what if and what does, if anything at all, changes within the programming of WWE, because something's got to happen. Look, I'm hard on the WWE, but rightfully so. They're not doing anything to deserve praise. And, you know, I would love to have the old WWF programming back. The Attitude Era, the pre-Attitude Era, the years that the WWF just absolutely took over and ran with the ball of the wrestling industry, and just made it everything that it was. And really, they're the architects for what it is now, because without the WWF's early influence and the way it brought wrestling to the forefront, not just in the regional territories, but across the entire planet, you might not have wrestling as a product like you do now. So they've got to be given credit for something. But you know, they're also, as much as they've built this industry, they're destroying this industry, and it's a shame, and it's got to change. And I hope it does change. I'd love to sit here one day and talk about all the amazing things that happen on WWE programming, but as of right now, there's no sign on the horizon that that's coming. And if that episode is in my future, that remains to be seen. Also in WWE news, and this one just blew my mind when I saw this last night on SmackDown. Jimmy Uso is back on SmackDown. Now I'm going to look at this from a couple different angles, because this is just days after another DUI arrest, and he's back in the forefront with this Roman Reigns storyline. And not only is he in the forefront, but Jimmy and Jey Uso, WWE is reportedly has some big things planned for them, and I'm imagining that's going to be a tag team title run. And, you know, can anybody tell me a job in the real world where you can get arrested for a DUI and then just days later be back to work and being praised by your bosses and being pushed for a promotion or a bonus or something like that? It doesn't happen. This is ridiculous. Now, I'm going to look at, again, like I said, I'm going to look at this two different ways. The first way I'm looking at this is, this just goes to show you that all Vince McMahon cares about is ratings. He does not give a crap about anything other than ratings, and this is all you're going to get out of him. He doesn't care about Jimmy Uso's well-being. And he doesn't care about the fact that he doesn't deserve to be on TV right now because he broke the law. He endangered himself and other people, and Vince just doesn't seem to care. So he's doesn't want to disrupt this Roman Reigns head of the table storyline. So he's just going to continue to push the Usos no matter what they're doing in their outside world. And that's just, I mean, that's beyond ridiculous. And I kind of touched on the other side I wanted to look at this is, you know, taking Jimmy Uso off of TV and punishing him for what happened is one thing, and I think that point needed to be made, and it's not. But also, he's got a legitimate problem here. This is not the first time he's been arrested or he has issues with substances, and he's going down a very dark path. Now, I can't say that I've ever struggled with addictions to alcohol or drugs or anything like that. It's never been an issue for me. You know, I've had friends who have had some alcohol dependency issues, but I've never really been that close to anyone that was a full-blown alcoholic. I have a very close friend who had an absolute, you know, full-blown alcoholic in his family, and it led to just more issues and just bad things in general for not only for the person with the problem but for the entire family. And it's a very sad thing to see that somebody can fall into that place, and it happens so much, and it's such a big issue that if Jimmy Uso is suffering with this, he needs help. Because not only is he going to suffer, but the people around him that care about him, that love him, they are also going to suffer. And if you're not going to address this and either demand that he get help or give him the outlets for the help that he needs, and all you care about is your ratings and the hell with what's happening with him and making a point and helping this guy, Vince McMahon is the absolute scumbag that I've talked about for how many episodes? For all the things he does with his Saudi Arabian blood money, with his independent contractor status for his employees, for all these releases that he's making within record profit years. This guy is the devil walking the earth. And this is just more proof of that. Help Jimmy Uso. Help his family. Help the people around him. Don't continue to encourage this, because that's what you're doing. If you're not making moves to either help or fix this, then you're just part of the problem. And this is going to escalate to the point where something really tragic is going to happen. And fingers are going to be pointed right in Vince McMahon's direction, and rightfully so. And I'm going to leave that at that for now, because that could be an episode all in itself, and you could just go on and on about what's going on with that situation, and it's wrong, and I'm just going to leave it at that for now. Also in WWE news, Bayley of the SmackDown brand, pretty much WWE's one of their top female wrestlers in the company, was injured while she was training for her Money in the Bank match at the Money in the Bank pay-per-view. And apparently they haven't gone into detail as to what the injury is, but they have gone so far as to say that she's going to be off for 9 months. And, you know, I've talked about my feeling on women's wrestling, and especially the WWE right now. It seems to be going back to where the WWE in recent years past made an effort to make the women's division more legitimate and more athletic. They just seem like they're going back to this silliness in the women's division, and they can't afford to lose what I guess is considered one of their better female wrestling talents. So I guess to fill in this absence of Bayley, they've called up Tegan Nox and Shotzi Blackheart from the NXT brand. And, you know, here we go. They're filling a void, they're filling a gap, but you're taking two performers who have had considerable amount of success on the NXT brand, you're bringing them up to the main roster, and somehow or another, these careers are going to be ruined and hurt, and it's just, It's just more of the same. NXT talent getting called up to the main roster, supposedly for a promotion, but it winds up hurting all the NXT talent in the long run. I mean, you look at Tommaso Ciampa and Johnny Gargano, they were brought up to the main roster for a very short period of time. And when they saw where their characters were heading, they wanted nothing to do with it anymore. They wanted to go back to NXT. Now think about this. These wrestlers on NXT don't like the fact that NXT is considered a developmental brand. The bottom line, it is, because it's a place for WWE wrestlers to train and learn their craft to the point where they can get good enough to be called up to the main roster. Now, WWE drops the ball on this every time as far as calling up to the main roster, because so many solid NXT performers, and believe me, I'm not knocking the talent in NXT. They're the best in the WWE, to be honest, but they find a way to ruin these careers when they come up. So how do you not consider this a developmental brand? You know, they don't draw huge ratings. They tried to use NXT to compete against AEW Dynamite, and that failed miserably. These guys, these talents that wrestle in NXT, have to set up their own ring for their events. They're not only performers, but they're ring crew. That's developmental all the way. That's what that is. That's what these small independent wrestling organizations do. The wrestlers take part in everything. It's not. It's just silly to even think of it as anything else. So, this is just par for the course. And unfortunately, as much as I'm not a fan of women's wrestling in its current form, Shotzi Blackheart and Tegan Knox, if they're successful on NXT, they should be just left there. Let the WWE go to outside sources, go to Impact. Impact has got a stacked women's division. AEW may have some women that they're willing to part with that they can spare. If you need people for the main roster, get them from the outside. Don't take your talent that's working their ass off to get someplace and to make something of their career and take them up to the main roster and then ruin them. It's not fair to them. NXT is developmental, and it's small, but it's got a following. It's got a passionate fan base. So don't ruin these performers' careers, because that's just not fair. And speaking of Shotzi Blackheart and Tegan Knox, this is another thing that WWE does. Tamina and Natalya are the women's tag team champions on Raw, and champions, for the most part, with some exceptions, and there's odd finishes and things like that, and stipulations that can cause a loss, but champions should always be made to look strong. They shouldn't be losing matches, especially to two developmental wrestlers who have just been called up to the main roster. And that's what they did here. Tamina and Natalya lost a match. It wasn't a title match, so they didn't lose the title, but still, you're taking your champions and you're forcing them to lose to what realistically, if you were looking at this in a real sports atmosphere, bringing up a developmental team and having them win is ridiculous. The developmental team, being their first night, being that they're brand new to the main roster, should still be the inferior team. And that doesn't make them look weak. It doesn't make them look bad. You can put them in a match and you can give them good offense, but they shouldn't be winning that match. It's not right to your champions, and it makes the champions look extremely weak. But that's what WWE does. Their champions lose these matches on a regular basis. It's nothing new, and it's a shame. But you know what? That's the way it is. And I'm just going to move on from there, because that's everything that I've got for WWE. Moving on to AEW news. This past Dynamite, Andrade made his in-ring debut against Matt Sydal. And this was just a very small dose as to what we're going to get from Andrade, because Matt Sydal, I do consider a enhancement talent, so to speak. He's there because he's a veteran. He's got a lot of years. He's got a lot of skill, and he can put on a great match. But he's there to show that through all his high risk, high powered, high flying offense. The person he's wrestling can still pull it out. So it just makes the talent that he's wrestling look better, because Seidel just looks like a real threat when he's in the ring, but he doesn't win, and you kind of know what he's there for, and he's fine with that role, and I give him credit for that. But this is just the beginning for Andrade. It wasn't it wasn't a 5-star match. It wasn't a high flying match. It was a fundamentally sound, good, entertaining match. Andrade won, and this is just the beginning. This is his launching point. He is going to be an absolute beast in AEW. I've said it from day one, and I'm going to stand on that and stake everything on that. Andrade is going to be an absolute beast, and I just look forward to what's in his future. The big surprise on AEW Dynamite this past week was the artist formerly known as Aleister Black. I'm not sure if it's his real name, but the name that he went by before his Aleister Black wrestling name, Tommy End, made a absolute shocking surprise debut on Dynamite. No one expected this. I'm sure there's people floating around the internet saying that they predicted it, but you know what? This was completely out of left field, completely unexpected, and I really like the way AEW set this up, because in the first match of the night on Dynamite, you had Cody wrestling QT Marshall in the strap match, and there was a very, very brief lights out power failure, and that's what the announcers addressed it as. It just went off for maybe a second, if that, and it came back on, and they talked about the weather in the Miami, Florida area, and how there was some power failures and some blackouts. Didn't make it ridiculously obvious. It was just very matter of fact, and moved on. So that longtime wrestling fan in me kept thinking this has got to be setting up for something else. It's got to be setting up for something else, but they played it off so well that I wasn't 100% sure, and I wasn't willing to say with complete confidence that this was a setup and there was something else coming. So I give them credit for the way they played that off. But then you had Arn Anderson in the ring being interviewed by Tony Schiavone, and it looked like he was going to announce something. He was talking about little things here and there, and it looked like he was on the verge of making some sort of announcement. The lights go out again, and this time they were off for a little bit longer. And when they came back on, Tommy End is standing in the ring dressed all in black. He had his right eye, they had makeup on it to make it look like it was damaged, and I believe he was wearing like a contact lens to make his actual eye cornea damaged. And I thought that was amazing, because he was actually playing off an injury suffered in WWE when he was feuding with Seth Rollins. So that's just, when an angle has transitions from one organization to another, I don't think I've ever seen that. So absolute credit to him for that. And I'm not sure if that was all his idea or if AEW, their staff, was in on that. Regardless, it was a brilliant move, and it looks great. And he just stood there for a second, and then and I don't know if it's still going to be called the Black Mass, but his finishing move from WWE, that kick, just completely knocked Arn Anderson on his ass, put him on the mat. Cody Rhodes charges the ring and kind of backs off. I'm going to call him Tommy End for now, because they hadn't made the announcement yet. Backed him off to check on, said he was going to check on Arn Anderson, and then he also got dropped by the Black Mass. And JR was, I believe, the first one in the announce team to shout out that, this was Tommy End. And Excalibur jumped in and corrected him. He had said that, I wrestled Tommy End years ago in another organization, and he said, this isn't the same Tommy End. This isn't Tommy End. Find him as Malakai Black. So that's going to be his name going forward in AEW. The signing has been officially announced by AEW, Tony Khan. And it's just, interesting because that same day, Tommy N had put out a self-produced video on I think it was Twitter, where he showed himself as an inmate in a mental hospital, and he was being interviewed by two doctors, and he had talked about how he was locked up in this place for 5 years, which coincidentally enough is the same amount of time that he spent in the WWE. So just like Jon Moxley did in his video with breaking out of prison, it showing, sort of indicating that I finally broke out of that WWE prison. Tommy N talks about being locked up for 5 years, and that's really what it was in the WWE, because he was really never allowed to let his creative side show. WWE doesn't allow that anymore, so good for him. And the big question was, he just got released from WWE a month ago, and WWE has this traditional 90-day no compete clause. How is he already here on AEW TV? Well, apparently WWE, in all their infinite wisdom, when Aleister Black was an NXT talent and he was brought up to the main roster and he was starting to be put in these storylines, well, he was still under an NXT contract. That being said, the WWE main roster talent have a 90-day no compete clause. The NXT talent have a 30-day no compete clause. And the WWE completely let this slip by when they put him on main roster TV. They never made any changes to the contract. They never updated the contract. He was basically still under the same restrictions. So he leaves the WWE. They're expecting not to see him until September. And here he is. And this was just an absolute shocking move. And Tony Khan had said in an interview, and I apologize, I watch so many of these interviews with these guys that I don't keep track all the time, but he had said that there are more surprises coming, that there's a lot of things that he's got in his pocket that he's held back on because of the pandemic, because he didn't want to have these things in front of empty arenas or only partially full arenas. And this event in Miami had, I believe, like 10,000 people there, or at least it looked like it. I don't know what the actual ticket count was or the head count, but it's awesome to see these things happen in front of a live crowd again. It's made wrestling so enjoyable again to see these fans just absolutely eating this up and going crazy. And this is how you do this. This is what makes Tony Khan one of the best in the world at this. He knows how to feed the fans what they're looking for at the right time, and to get this reaction that really just makes this absolutely an electric atmosphere. So good for him. I hope that there's just so much good in the future for all this new talent. Malakai Black, Andrade El Idolo, just wishing them all the best, and whoever else is coming in. There's, and this is the nice thing, is that AEW doesn't forget its existing talent, its homegrown talent, because everybody that's been there since day one, that's still there, they've lost very few wrestlers in their short existence. They've been around a couple years. They really haven't cut ties with very many people. A couple women's wrestlers, and well, I feel bad because I can't remember his name, the one hardcore wrestler, but that was during the Speak Out movement, and he had some issues that really made it where they had no choice but to make the move they did. But all in all, this roster is still intact, and even though they're bringing in these new big names, and they're definitely big names, Andrade and Malakai Black are going to be absolutely huge talents for AEW for a long time to come, but they're not sacrificing their current talent to give these guys the entire spotlight. And that's what I love about this organization, is you see everyone, and new talent is still being developed in their Nightmare Factory and brought up through Dark Elevation and Dark, and it's a great process, and this is the way a promotion should be run. Lastly, in the AEW report, I want to talk about. Now, I'm not going to give a lot of detail on the person involved or what he said because I'm just not going to give him the airtime, and I'm not going to promote his name or encourage anyone to look him up or give him clicks. But an idiot fan charged the ring at Dynamite on this last show during the Chris Jericho MJF face to face. Apparently this moron was trying to get to the ring to try and take a shot at MJF, and he was immediately grabbed by security. Jericho got in quick and threw a punch on this guy, and right after that, security took him down and knocked him off the ramp, and he was escorted out. And I don't know for sure. I have heard rumors that Tony Khan was going to be pressing charges, which I hope he does, because this needs to be, he needs to show that this is 100% not going to be tolerated in any way, shape, or form. And this guy needs to, whatever the fullest extent of the law you can bring down on this. It's not a major offense. I mean, he didn't actually get his hands on anybody, but this can't be encouraged. And absolutely ridiculous. So, like I said, I'm not going to give his name because his name is out there. He's been spouting off on Twitter, so proud of what he did, saying that, it took all the security to take him down, and that Chris Jericho punches like a bitch and all this. This guy is just, he's his own promoter, and nobody else really cares about this guy. They want to see this guy fall because he deserves to. But what I'm getting at is he had said something in his Twitter account shouting out to Jim Cornette, saying that he did this for them. In other words, for Cornette, for Brian Last, for himself, and for all the so-called cult of Cornette followers who support real professional wrestling and think AEW is a joke. Now, I got to be real clear on what I'm about to say, because I've said before that I think Jim Cornette is really he's like a living legend in professional wrestling. He's been around through so many years. He's been heavily involved in angles and managing and getting in the ring, and just, he's a very intelligent student of the game. But the problem with Jim Cornette is he thinks that he knows everything, he's never wrong, and that he's the definitive source on what's right and what's wrong in professional wrestling. In other words, fans are wrong if they don't like what he likes. Fans of AEW are not fans of professional wrestling, apparently, because AEW is all bad, because it's a carny show, because it's a mud show, because Jim Cornette says so. And I've said before that he's got a platform. He's got a lot of followers. He's got a lot of listeners. And it's completely wrong and irresponsible to try and ruin something or someone or an organization who's not hurting anybody, who's not doing anything wrong, just because you disagree with the way it's run and the way they're doing their business. Wrestling has evolved. It has changed. It has grown. There are so many different styles in professional wrestling, and AEW celebrates all of them. It's not just an organization of high flyers. It's not just an organization of hardcore wrestlers. It's not just an organization of traditional old school wrestlers. There is something for everyone in AEW. Something for everyone. And Cornette is just ridiculously, unreasonably hard on them, and to use his platform, because I sincerely think that he wants to try and drive their viewership down, put them out of business so that he can say he's right. But you know what? I think Jim Cornette was one of the guys that said AEW wouldn't make it a year, and here we are going almost at the end of year 2, and they've got their second show on the way. They've got 2 successful YouTube shows. They're gaining talent all the time. They're not going anywhere. Now, where I'm going with all this is I just want to point out that when I say what I'm going to say, I'm not supporting Jim Cornette in his whole. But what I am saying is I'm going to give him credit because when this idiot that charged the ring did the shout out to him, Cornette was at least intelligent enough to shout back and tell this guy that, you're not doing this for me. You're an idiot. You're blocked. You're banned. Doesn't support what this guy did in the least. He called it like it was. This guy was a complete moron, a complete irresponsible jerk. He could have hurt somebody. He could have gotten hurt himself. And I'll give Cornette credit for that. But Kenny Omega made a really good point on Twitter, and this is something that I did not think about. And I wrote this down so I wouldn't forget what he had said. But Kenny Omega took to Twitter and made this comment towards Jim Cornette. Where does it begin here? I'm sorry. He says, is it finally time to assume responsibility and dial the online personality back a bit? Your low IQ man children have evolved from parroting your comments to actually acting out in attempted violence. He's completely right. Cornette, the way he talks about AEW and the way he incites these people that listen to him, there's going to be a psychopath in this group. There's going to be an idiot in this group that's going to take it to this level because of Cornette's constant poking and prodding, because Cornette makes sure he watches every episode of Dynamite and to point out everything that he thinks is wrong. If he hates this thing so much and you got nothing good to say about it, stop watching and stop reviewing. Just make an episode where you say, you know what? I've been watching AEW for almost 2 years now. I've given it a chance. I never have anything good to say about it. I get optimistic when I see certain things are going to happen and I try watching it and I'm disappointed. So I'm not watching anymore, and leave it alone. But he continues to hammer on these guys, and specifically Kenny Omega. And what his problem is with Kenny Omega, I will never understand. And then his little buddy, Brian Last, his little sidekick that just mirrors everything that Jim Cornette says, because it gives him his own platform and gives him a way to get his name and his voice out because he tags along with Jim Cornette. They both are just absolutely ridiculous. Kenny Omega is arguably, and anybody can make a point for him being the best wrestler in the world. He wrestles through severe injuries. He puts on incredible matches with talent that normally wouldn't be able to put on a 5-star match. Kenny Omega brings out the best in everyone. And when he's in the ring with someone comparable or someone who's close to equal to his talent, it's match of the year caliber every time. I challenge anybody that thinks Kenny Omega is not a great wrestler to go back into the New Japan archives and watch his matches with Kazuchika Okada. And if you can seriously sit there and make an intelligent argument as to why these aren't, every one of them, great 5-star or more matches, you're not going to do it. You're going to come off as sounding absolutely ridiculous and silly, because he is that good. And he gives everything to his fans. Cornette's got some really idiotic reasons why he's got this problem with Kenny Omega that I'm not going to go into, because they're just, I think I've talked about them before in earlier episodes, and it's just absolutely stupid and ridiculous. So I'm not going to give it any more airtime because it's just pure stupidity. But I'm not going to read Jim Cornette's response to this tweet from Kenny Omega, because just like everything else he does with Omega, with AEW, with the Young Bucks, it's just a response full of insults and swear words and just all kinds of garbage, because Cornette can't have an intelligent conversation when it comes to AEW. Nothing he says comes off as intelligent when he addresses his product. So I give him credit for not supporting this absolute jackass that charged the ring at Dynamite, but you know what? Omega's got a great point. When you've got an audience like you do, you have to be careful. You have to be responsible. And he is not. And to say that he should take some responsibility for inciting this, I think is legitimate. And if he's going to refuse to tone it down, he's just going to take this attitude that he's right and Kenny Omega is an idiot and everybody in AEW sucks, and he's just going to continue to bash and speak out against them, then at some point, something is going to happen in excess of what has happened already. There's going to be someone else that's going to do something in the name of Jim Cornette's going to wind up hurting somebody, is going to wind up hurting innocent people, fans involved, because, you know, fans surrounding an idiot like this that decides to do something like this could easily, you know, try and do the right thing, the civil thing, and step in and try and stop it. And somebody could wind up getting hurt. And it's gonna be a lot worse than what happened now, because really everybody walked away uninjured. But the potential for something more disastrous is there. And if something does happen, then somebody's going to have to hold Cornette's feet to the fire and hold him responsible, because what he does is absolutely ridiculous. And I'm going to leave that at that. Last thing today, I'll talk a little bit about New Japan Pro Wrestling. Wrestling Headlines has reported that Koda Ibushi is going to unfortunately miss tonight's Struggle in Sapporo event. Apparently, he's been having side effects to a COVID-19 vaccine. And, you know, that's the unfortunate thing about this is it's a new thing. And who knows what, if any, side effects there could be or are. And I personally know a couple of people who have been just dragged out from this thing, and it's different for everybody. I got the vaccine. I felt absolutely nothing other than my arm was sore for about a week after. But beyond that, I didn't feel sick. Nothing lingered with me. So just hopefully all goes well for Ibushi. Want to see him healthy and in the ring, because he is one of the greatest talents in the world. And, you know, he finally won that New Japan Pro Wrestling title earlier this year, and then for whatever reason lost it right away. So it just seems like the hits keep on coming for Koda Ibushi. Also, the G1 Climax tournament, the dates have been announced for this, and it's going to start on September 18th, will be night one, and this will end on October 21st. And this is considerably later in the year for the G1 Climax tournament. Normally it takes place in August, but as everything has been affected for so long now, the pandemic has just kind of screwed up their scheduling, and they're doing what they have to do to stay on track and keep things going. But you know, the G1 is really one of their biggest events of the year. It's huge. It's something that I would say I never watched the entire thing. I mean, you can see as long as this event goes, there's certainly matches that I'm just not interested in, but there's always just big matches with big ramifications, and it's a great event. The matches that really are the highlight of the event are always just amazing, incredible matches, and I'm looking forward to this one just like I do every year. And if you have the chance, if you haven't experienced New Japan Pro Wrestling, you know what? It costs you like $10 a month to get the New Japan World streaming service, and the archives are extensive. They have every match from the history of New Japan in there, as well as all their new events. So why not give it a shot? If you're a wrestling fan and you haven't seen New Japan, or you're not really versed in New Japan, you may not know what you're missing, and I encourage you to give it a shot at least. If you don't like it, you don't like it. What's the worst thing that can happen? You lose $10. I get it sucks, but you know what? A lot worse things could happen, and the best thing that could happen is you're going to discover one of the most incredible wrestling products in the world, and you'll be hooked, and you won't cancel the service, and you're going to go through those archives, and you're going to look forward to the upcoming events just like I do. So give it a shot, and I'll leave it at that. That's all I got for today. I want to thank you again, everybody, so much for joining me. I appreciate it. And again, just like I start the video, as long as you're here, click that subscribe button, click on the little thumbs up, give me a like for this video. And don't forget the little bell icon. Click on that, because every time I upload new content, you will be alerted through YouTube that something new is on there and you can check it out. Thank you again for joining me. Look forward to next time, as I always do. And as always, please be good to yourself and be good to each other. Thank you.